I've been teaching at Bogazici University for 41 years. It's been a long time. And I work now in the support center. Our job is to help you with any learning difficulties, any problems you have with your learning in the prep school, all right? With your writing, your reading, your listening, or anything else which interferes with learning, including learning disabilities, okay? Now, before we start talking about the individual skills, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how we learn. Now, our minds have been, oh, by the way, you can take notes, I suggest you do. Now, when I go to seminars or lectures, I take notes all the time. I find it easier to follow the talk if I'm taking notes. To get back to what I was saying, our minds have often been compared to computers. But this is a very misleading comparison, because the operating system you are born with cannot be upgraded, all right? What's more, your computer will ask you before it does things. The operating system in your minds will not, all right? And there's nothing you can do about this. So first of all, we need to talk about the basics of this operating system, since we have to fit in with it. First of all, you learn, now we're talking about language learning specifically here. Your mind acquires knowledge and retains it by forming connections, all right? Connections. That means, for example, if you're learning vocabulary, the worst way you can learn is to memorize lists of words, because your mind cannot make the connections. They'll go in and they'll go out. Your mind will not ask you whether it should save the material. It will delete it, all right? When will it be persuaded to retain it? If there are connections. In this case, it means you need to see the words in the context of reading or listening. And not just once, minimum 7 times. And that changes from person to person. Only then will you remember. And then you will remember the meaning of the word, but you still may not be able to actively use it. There are levels of learning, and active, comfortable use comes later. It doesn't automatically follow that if you know the word, you can then use it. It doesn't work that way. So this is the way our minds work. We've got to form connections, and there has to be repeated exposure to whatever it is. This means revision, lots of it, all right? And our whole learning system is based on this. Going against that is illogical, all right? Research has proved that you forget up to 60% of what you learn within the first 24 hours, all right? It is called Ebbinghaus's famous curve of forgetting. After the first initial drop, the forgetting is slower. But if we want to prevent this, we need to revise. All right? Hence, with everything you do, with your reading, your listening, your writing, there is the structured part you do in class, and there is the unstructured part you do after class. Otherwise, progress in a program like this is very difficult. You have 8 months, let's face it. It's not a year. Something like 8 months, all right? So this, it's important to know this. Now, let's talk about the material we're going to use and how we're going to use it, and also why we're going to use it in a particular way. Now,
welcome to this free online class on machine learning.
Huh?
Machine learning is
The
one of
other
the most
laptop
exciting recent
wasn't like
technologies.
this. How
In
Yeah.
this class, you learn about the state of the
yardım
art
eder mi?
and also gain practice implementing and deploying these algorithms yourself.
oynamıyor?
You probably use a learning algorithm dozens of times a day without
Yok,
knowing
hayır,
it.
hayır.
Every time you use a web search engine like Google or Bing to search the internet, one of the reasons that works so well is because a learning algorithm, when implemented by Google,
Şuraya geçelim. Yazacağız.
Şurada var biliyorsun.
Evet işte. İmleçle geçeriz. Hafif mi? Ha, çok hafif dokunmam gerekiyor.
Biz yardımcı
Çok
olalım
hafif.
hocam size oturarak olmazsa.
Yok yok, bundan sonrasını hallederiz.
İnşallah.
Ben gerekirse şey yaparım, sana söylerim. Now, do you know this site? Now, this is my blog, one of my blogs, and this is where I post material, writing material, reading material, everything, and links to outside sources. I set up this site so that students could have a good free source to study with outside class. There is very little material either on the internet or in bookstores which suits our purposes. All right? Now, at this point, I'd like to just mention some of the stuff that is sold at Hisarüstü. Now, in the photocopy shops, you will find material, reading material, for example, which is claimed to be old Bogazici material. That's true. Some of it is. Not all of it. Some of it is. But the key word is old. Now you have to think. This is happening just outside the campus. Why doesn't anybody do anything about it? Copyright? Nobody cares. You know why? Because things have changed. The way we ask questions on the exams have changed. That stuff has been discarded. In other words, we don't use it any longer. Why? Because it's not useful for us. Okay? More about that later and why. Now, have a look at this blog. Now, on the left, you have got a series of subtitles. I'm trying to make friends with the laptop. Now, notice the list is in alphabetical order. You've got various essay types. Here, you've got a section titled Common Mistakes. Now, what I do is I ask people to bring in their writing tasks as soft copies. All right? Put your writing tasks on Google Drive or on cloud or somewhere else like that. Not flash drives. I don't like to plug those in. bring them that way. Then I have a record of your writing, which I can scan for typical mistakes. Now, those mistakes I have put together here. So this is a place you need to study. Now, let's have a look at writing first, before we talk about anything else. Now, the first section, I'm going to show you everything that's available. You use anything, you use as much as you need. Now, I've got a section titled How to Plan and Write Essays. This is designed for self-study. That means I'm assuming that you are doing this by yourself with no teachers available. Now, let's have a look at one of these essay types. Something you've done. How to plan and write comparison and contrast essays. First, you've got the purpose. The purpose in this type of essay is not to compare two things. That would be crazy. Why would you compare two things? All right? You have to have a reason for comparison. Maybe you're going to make a selection, a choice. Maybe you're trying to make a decision, but the comparison is a tool. All right? So that's very important. Then you've got the plan. How to write the introduction, a sample introduction, more explanation, a second example, same for the development, an explanation and an example, the same for the conclusion, and a full-length essay. Now, when you feel you're ready and you've come to grips with it, if you feel you need to, you can come to this section, writing exercises. Now, as I said, this is designed for self-study. Not all the people who use this blog are students, regular students at school. Maybe they're preparing on their own for a big exam, in which case they may need something like this. You may not, because you have your teachers to help you. These are half-written essays. Now notice the first one is a comparison, Mediterranean versus Northern European people. I write the introduction for you. I also write the conclusion, and I give you a plan for the development. So we go step by step. Now, when you feel you're ready, you say, okay, I've got that. Then you move on to selecting a title. Now, these are all the writing topics on the blog. There are literally hundreds, over 1,000 topics here. All right. You locate the topics by copy-pasting the title into the search section. Now let us just look at one of these, one of the ones at the beginning. Micro-living. Have you any idea what micro-living is? No. Now, I select the topics so that you cannot sit down and write them out of your heads, just off the top of your heads. We do some research before we start. Now, if you look at that writing task, that's not like any writing task you've ever seen before. You've got a whole lot of research material. Shall I show you some of them? Let's show you what micro-living is. They're tiny. That's the house. All right, there's the bathroom. So, micro-living is all about living in much smaller areas. After you've familiarized yourself with the topic, you come and check out the reading material. Now, here you read and take notes. When you've done that, you watch the videos. You listen and take notes. All right? You do all this research. Why do we do this? Why don't we just take a topic and write? Well, we do that as well. But in order to raise the level of your English, to increase your competence in the use of the language, you need input. Otherwise, you will be using your existing knowledge each time. You'll be reflecting that into your essays, all right? And that's not enough, because we want to progress fast, all right? So, input. Input in the form of listening, input in the form of reading. We pull all those skills into our writing at once. So what do? You see information about the topic, phrases, vocabulary items, all of these in your listening, in your reading, numerous times. You sit down to write, and you're automatically thinking in English. When you sit down to write, the phrases you think of will be those that you heard, those that you read. All right? Not Turkish. So this system of working will get you used to thinking in English. You've written them as well. We have ticked all the boxes. Remember, you have to see something at least 7 times to remember it. You have to make connections so that you can learn. We have done all of this. So you'll remember, words and structures learnt this way will not be forgotten very easily. All right? So it's not the number of essays you write, it's how you prepare for each piece of writing. All right? For practical purposes, this cannot be done in class. All right? Because the research takes a lot of time. How should the research be done? Ideally, spread it over 2 days. Remember forgetting? Remember what I told you? 60% is forgotten in the first 24 hours. So spread it over 2 days, the research. Do, say, one of the videos, some of the reading the first day, finish the rest the second day, and immediately sit down and write. That way, you're increasing your chances of retaining information. Select topics that you enjoy learning about. It's very important, because if you enjoy something, you will try to learn, you will try to understand, because you will want to, all right? And that helps learning, all right? Now, one other thing those little photocopy places at Hisarüstü to do for us is sell you a whole lot of corrected essays. Now, they sell them in bunches and folders. Now, there's a little problem though. We don't know who has checked these essays? Some of them may be very carefully corrected. We don't know. Some of them may not be. All right? We have no idea. So don't pay for those. I've put up, I've got this second blog where I post essays. At the moment, there are close to 400 essays up here. We're going to get more. Notice the categories to the right of the screen. We've got various essay types. We've got graded essays. And we've got essays by experts as well. We've got summaries, and we've got a list of all the writing topics on this site. The graded essays are graded out of 100, but they follow our proficiency writing scheme. Okay, so the 60 here would get a passing grade on the proficiency. Okay. Now, different from other sites, there are no mistakes in these essays. There are no mistakes at all. So how do I grade them? I grade them according to level of complexity. All right? On a typical exam, an essay that gets a 60 might have a few mistakes in it. It will. All right? But that's another story. Since this is a blog and it's meant to be an example, they are all correct. The ones that get 60 are simple and correct. Those that get a 70 or above are more complex in terms of sentence structure, vocabulary choice, and all of that. All right? Now, to go back to our blog. So that's all about our writing. Now, let's talk a little bit about reading as well. If you look at the subtitles on the right of the screen, you've got how to use the blog, which I'm telling you now. You've got learning disabilities. Learning disabilities are problems like dyslexia, which prevent you or make it difficult for you to learn languages. If you have problems of this kind or ADHD, come and see me separately, because we know how to help these students as well. Now, then we've got learning strategies. Now, let's have a look at the learning strategies. Now, here you've got videos of everything I would be telling you in class if I was with you, which means your teachers have probably told you a lot of this, but if you need reminding, there they are. How to identify topics, main ideas, and supporting details. Very important for your reading and your writing, because most questions concern main ideas, topics, and conclusions. So being able to find them will help. How to paraphrase. A lot of reading questions involve paraphrasing. Again, very important. How to improve your reading comprehension. The first 3 videos are all about how to read a text in order to understand it. It is different from lying on a beach and reading a bestseller. All right? It's not the same thing. Question types and how to answer them. How to learn vocabulary. I've already told you that it's a bad idea to memorize lists. There's a lot more there. How to develop your speaking skills. Now, this, unfortunately, is not something we focus on in our university for practical reasons. One, we don't have the time. We only have 8 months. Two, we have too many students. You can't have conversation in a class of this size, okay? So what did we do? We asked the rest of the university what they wanted us to prioritize. We said we can't do everything perfectly, so what would you like us to prioritize? They put speaking at the end of the list. All right, they had listening, reading, and writing, but speaking was at the end, so that was sacrificed to a certain extent. But there's a lot you can do on your own. These videos all provide information about what you can do on your own. So watch them, follow the advice, and do your best. The list goes on. This is a very big section. Now, before we start talking about your reading, what I would like to do is to introduce you to this section. Now, this section was prepared by a school. All these videos are videos uploaded by one school, all right? Now, we're going to talk about question types before we start talking about reading.
Hi, Debbie. How's your science fair project coming along?
Just about finished, Mrs. C.
What does your robot do?
She can read any piece of text and answer all of your questions about it.
Really?
Sure, try it out.
Okay, let's see. How about this?
She took off her red coat and sat in the waiting room, still talking loudly on the phone. If that's how you want it, fine, she said, and mashed the end call button. She then crossed her arms, lowered her eyebrows and said, humph, to nobody in particular.
Wow, she's a good reader.
Now ask her a question.
Okay, robot. What color is the woman's coat?
Red.
That's right.
I told you.
Let me try another one. Robot, how does the woman feel?
Does not compute.
Wait a second. The text doesn't say how the woman feels.
It doesn't literally tell us how she feels, but we may be able to infer how she feels. How do you think she feels, Debbie?
She's totally angry.
And how do you know that? What words in the text make you think she is angry?
She mashed the button when she hung up the phone, and she crossed her arms and said,
Very good. Your robot was able to answer a literal question, like what color is her coat?
Red.
But she couldn't answer an inferential question, like how does the woman feel?
Does not compute.
But notice how you still used words from the text to support your answer to the inferential question.
I guess I did, didn't I?
Yes.
Looks like I have more work to do.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
Now, the first thing we need to talk about is question types. Now, what we're going to talk about now is one category of reading tasks. There are two. What are they? What are the two different types of reading tasks called? Do you think? I gave you a clue at the beginning. Now, there are two types, extensive reading and intensive reading. Remember what I said at the beginning? Because of the way we learn, there has to be structured tasks that we do and the unstructured tasks as well. Intensive reading is the structured part. So there are questions, there are time limits, all right? the activity is carefully controlled. Now, in this video, you saw that there are two groups of questions: literal questions and inferential questions. The questions that the university used to use in the past, many years ago, I've been here since the first proficiency. It sounds like prehistoric times, doesn't it? Were more literal in character, like what color is her coat. But we later decided that these types of questions were not really preparing you for university, because we weren't looking to see if you could draw conclusions, if you could summarize, if you could identify main ideas, if you could go beyond the text and discover examples, make connections. These are the cognitive skills that a university student needs to be able to do. So we discarded a whole lot of material, and that material is now on sale in Hisarüstü. All right? Proficiency reading, proficiency writing, what do you think those are? All right? That's that. So don't pay for it. If you want to pay, make a donation to Türk Eğitim Vakfı or somewhere like that. All right? My blog is free. That's the advantage. All right? We now use inferential questions. Now, inferential, how do you know whether the material is appropriate for you? If you can find the answers to a question in a reading task without completely reading and understanding the text, with words, contextual clues, then that reading task is not appropriate to your needs. All right? Okay. Now, I've got 5 categories of reading tasks on this blog. Notice 5 levels of difficulty. Now, the level 1 is not beginner level. I use original texts. All right? So, that's the easiest we can find. What does it mean for our purposes? Level 1 can be done by intermediate students at the beginning of the year. Halfway through the first semester, intermediate students should be able to move on to level 2, which will spill over into the second term, after which they will start level 3. Level 3 is enough for our proficiency. So why do we have level 4 and 5? Well, the proficiency is where we draw the line. We say this is enough, meaning enough for your first year at university. We say, all right, you can stay afloat on the water now. You know how to breathe while you're swimming. We've taught you that. Now you can go and learn how to swim butterfly on your own. All right, that's basically what it is. We have to have a cutoff point. Now, 4 and 5 are more difficult than the proficiency. The texts are more difficult, the questions are harder, everything, all right? So you don't have to stop there. You can go as far as you like. I recommend that you do, all right? Now, since it's the beginning of the, let's talk about pre-intermediate students as well. Now, pre-intermediate students should be able to cope with level 1 halfway through the first term. Not, say 1/3 of the way through the first term, all right? And should be moving on to level 2 now. The speed picks up in the second term, so come May, everybody's doing the same stuff, okay? Now, you ought to be covering level 2 reading tasks. But before we look at examples, let me show you how you navigate this thing. There are all the level 2 reading tasks. There are a lot of them. All right, it goes on and on and on, categorized by topic. The categories are the same for each level. Think of it like a greater than sign, all right? So you get the same structures, the same vocabulary, say in the science texts, that you had in level 1. But there's more, there are extras, additions as well. And the level of complexity will increase as you progress. Again, choose stuff you're interested in. If you're interested, you'll try and understand because you'll be curious. You'll want to understand. You'll learn better and more easily, and you'll remember better. All right? Again, we find the reading tasks by copy-pasting into the search section. I use Blogspot for practical reasons. Blogspot belongs to Google, and there are no limits. You can make it as big as you like. WordPress is smarter. There are more applications to make it look pretty. But there are limits, a lot of limits, all right? As in terms of space and quota.